All right, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to our webinar today, talking about delivering the right message to the right audience. We're going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we have a great audience here today, and hopefully we deliver the right message. A couple quick housekeeping things we wanted to tell you. We are recording this just in case you have to step away or get a phone call. We will be recording it and delivering the recording to your inbox. And what else should we tell them today? We have another webinar coming up next month on the 27th of April, so you can watch out for that one as well. And this recording and this webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go to our YouTube channel, we can have, what do we have, 5 or 6 other webinars on there right now. So all our webinars are hosted on our YouTube channel, NUVI. You can follow that and watch up and catch up on all our other webinars that we've done so far.
Okay, perfect. Here's our @NUVI is our Twitter handle, YouTube again. And then the presenters today are Scott Brown. He's the digital marketing specialist at NUVI. And then myself, Darren Faber. I'm the director of social media at Foxtel Marketing. And so we've done a couple of these webinars together now. So hopefully we've kind of gotten into the flow, but
I think we have some good back and forth going on.
Perfect. And just a little about NUVI then.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, NUVI, we're a social media listening analytics platform. We'll talk a little bit more about how NUVI delivers the right audience to you and how you can find the audience. But let's just jump right into our webinar today.
Okay, perfect. And if you guys have questions during the webinar, please feel free to ask them. We're going to try to answer as many questions as we can during the webinar, as opposed to just waiting all the way till the end. We figure it's probably better to have it all in context, as we're talking about it, if we need to. So yeah, feel free to answer questions or ask questions, and we'll answer them as much as we can. As a result, this might go a little bit longer than expected. So if you have to jump off, that's fine. Again, we're going to send you the recording. So hopefully this will provide some value to you guys and help us all to be more effective in our marketing and basically in all of our communication by learning more about our audience and being able to deliver the right message to them. So I guess the big question right up front is why does it matter so much that this is the case? And it kind of seems self-explanatory, but not necessarily to the extent or to the importance that it really is. There are so many benefits to knowing exactly who your audience is and who you want your audience to be, and knowing how to speak to those people, how to reach those people, how to find those people. It'll save you a lot of trouble, a lot of time, a lot of money, if you're in the marketing industry or a business. And not only that, but especially, and that's true for the whole process. When you're marketing to these people, you want to reach the right people, because if you're talking to the wrong person and they get all the way to the sales, end of it, then the sales guy's wasting a bunch of his time as well, trying to get someone to buy who's really not the right buyer. Or maybe someone actually buys, but then the relationship doesn't work, and suddenly you're losing money because this client or customer is upset, and then they tell all their friends about it, and suddenly you're losing a bunch of value on that end as well. So throughout the whole process of business and gaining customers and keeping customers, and the audience isn't just prospects, it's also who your customers are now. It's very important. And so we have Scott.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Darren, but I watch a lot of HGTV, and you think about advertising, you think about marketing just in general. Everyone's trying to hit their audience and spot on. And I noticed that in watching HGTV, like maybe I'm not quite their target audience. A lot of the advertising, a lot of the messaging is definitely geared towards the woman of the household. And I find that a lot of the commercials obviously miss the boat on me. But then every once in a while, HGTV will throw in that commercial for the new truck or the tool sale or whatever, the things that would interest me, not that they wouldn't interest everyone else, but the things that I would be interested in. And sometimes those messages actually hit the target spot on, because I've already tuned out all of the more matronly messaging, and I am paying attention directly to this one ad. Oh, yeah, that's something I'm interested in, and they hit the mark.
And it stands out against those other things as well, right?
Perfect. Yep.
Okay, cool. So one example is the Donald, Mr. Trump. Now, we're not going to get all political here. We're just going to talk more about the whole message. And I think Donald Trump has some amazing examples of both the good and the bad on this. I think many of the headlines on Donald Trump throughout the whole election had to do with when he would say something that was not geared toward his target audience, and it caused an uproar, and everyone would talk about that terrible thing that he said, because he didn't know his audience. and he didn't speak to them the right way. Alternatively, he was elected, so he must have done something right on that end. And now that he's president, could you imagine, how important it is now that he's the leader of the United States to know exactly who he's speaking to at all times and know exactly how to speak to those people? Because one wrong conversation, one wrong statement could lead to disaster, could lead to war. It could lead to, trade being cut off. It could lead to all sorts of crazy, crappy things. But on the other side of it, as long as he can do that and he listens to his advisors and they can fill him in on that stuff as much as possible, like he could have a great presidency. We don't even know, and that's yet to be seen. So, especially when you're in a position of importance, a leader at your company or even just your team, knowing how to talk to your team or to other people or to your prospects. It's so important because it really is make or break. How well do you know them? How well can you speak to them? So I think Donald Trump is a great example of, just how monumental how important this whole concept is.
Yeah, I love Donald Trump and mentioning him in webinars. I think I've mentioned him on almost every webinar since he was elected, because everyone cringes and everyone stops. And what I like to say and how I like to rephrase it is everyone has a Donald Trump, right? Everyone has a Donald Trump in their industry, in their topic of conversation, in their family or friends. Everyone has someone that is maybe missing the mark, maybe missing the message, maybe missing the audience, or saying good or bad things about you, and you need to make sure you know about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go over the benefits again, and this is more geared toward marketing and sales, and actually business in general, since that's mostly what we're talking about here. The benefits of knowing your audience and speaking to them correctly. Number one, you get much higher conversion rates. It costs you less money. You get more conversion. More people will get there, and it just resonates more with your audience. As a result, you get much more engagement. If you're working with social media or even just with the content that you send to people via email or a slide deck or a webinar like this, more people will be engaging with it and will actually pay attention to it rather than just skimming through or whatever. If you have the right message with the right audience. It also increases you and your company's thought leadership. It kind of proves to people that you're an authority on this topic, that you know what you're talking about, that you can be trusted. And that trust is really what leads to business later on down the road. And again, you can save money on your marketing. If you have the right targeting and the right messaging, oftentimes your ads will cost less. You'll get a higher conversion rate, so it'll cost less per acquisition. And you can save tons and tons of money on that end. And then make tons and tons of money on the other end. So it kind of goes both ways. You bookend yourself with additional savings and more money. So it's just so much better, to be able to do this research in advance. Take the effort, take the time to get to know your audience and how to speak to them. All right. So here's what do you need to know about your audience? Then that's kind of the key here. Now, a bunch of these items don't really matter when you're communicating with somebody, but may matter when you're targeting these people or trying to reach these people. It's not just about, how well, how does someone speak? How do I speak to this person? It's also, okay, how do I find this person? Where do they go? What is their demographic so that I can learn more about, their culture and things like that as well. The more you know about somebody, the easier it is to find them, to speak to them, and to get them to engage. So the first step are the basic demographics, and this is particularly helpful if you're running ads on social media or on Google or anything like that. But what is their age? What's their gender? Where are they located? Are you only in the United States? Or are you trying to go global or just in one local area? Do you have a restaurant that you just want to get local foot traffic to? What is their family situation? Are they married? Do they have children? Are they two people working, or is the stay-at-home mom, or those kinds of things as well? And if they do have a job, what is their job title? What are the responsibilities that they have? What are they going to care about, right? Then moving on, common interests. What hobbies do they have? You could easily manage your message to incorporate some of these common hobbies and ideas and likes and interests of your audience that might just help them, match with that message a little bit more, relate to that a little bit more. What are the watering holes? And what we mean here is like, where do they go for their information? Do they go to, what publications do they read? What social channels are they using? Where are they going to get the news? A lot of people don't even watch the news anymore. They just get it online. Where are they going for that? And what is the tone and the voice of their communication? How do they speak? How are they expected to be spoken to? And this is a little bit interesting as well. Actually, Scott has a point right here.
Well, I know that we do this every day. We do this professionally, just even in day to day with our coworkers. At least I do. I know that just to show an example here, we just had a recent new hire. I got a new boss here at NUVI, and getting to know him a little bit, right? I need to know exactly maybe not exactly what he's thinking at all times, but that's what a good, it's good to understand your boss and your situation and things that he is interested and passionate about. And we found out that we both like Survivor. We love Survivor. We watch Survivor. We're diehards. We get way into it. And so instantly we have something that connects, that is easy to talk about. And so when you're trying to have a more difficult conversation, or you're trying to have whatever it is you're asking for or whatever, you still have something that's in common. You're doing the same thing, whether you're working with a coworker or you have an intern or a new boss or whatever it is. You're trying to build those relationships the same way you would with a potential customer. Having that audience and have them understand them as well as they understand you.
Right, and that's an interesting thing, because I've gone to a lot of networking events with our CEO, and one thing that he's always told me is that he spends at least an hour every day just reading about anything, right? And I've watched him in these networking events doing just that, right? He's finding the one thing that the other person cares about, enough that they can communicate about that one thing, and then it's a natural progression into something else, right? So he learns as much as he can about everything that he can, so that he has an ability to speak about that, or at least ask the right questions, in order to build that kind of relationship with the other person. And then it's not as daunting to talk about your business or about what you're doing, or potential partnership or things like that, right?
Yeah, we were one more quick note on that. We were at a trade show this last week, Domopalooza. If anyone from Domopalooza is listening, hello. It was awesome. And we had some people come up to our booth, and we asked them where they were from, and they said they were from Michigan. Now, I've never been to Michigan, and the only things I really know about Michigan are their sports teams. But I do know this one trick with people from Michigan, and if we have people from Michigan here, I guarantee that they'll be doing this motion while we're talking. But you hold your hand up like a mitten, and you say, "Where in Michigan are you from?" And you point, because Michigan is shaped like a mitten. And I did this to the people at our booth at Domo. I said, "Where in Michigan are you from?" And I held up my hand like a mitten, and they pointed to the exact location of where they were from. And because I knew that one little thing about them, I knew that Michigan people know that their state is shaped like a mitten or a glove. And if you hold your hand up and ask them where they're from, they're going to just voluntarily point and touch your hand where they are from in the state. And something like that is just dynamite, right? Like that instantly I had something to talk with them about. They trusted me. I trusted them. Like, it was instant connection. Perfect message.
Yeah, definitely. And so those common interests are really what help you to get in the door. And then once you do get in the door, then you have to talk about what you are going to do for them, right? And so this is where it's really important to know what their pain points are. What is it that you are trying to solve for them, and is it, what do they experience on a day-to-day basis that you might be able to help them with? And even on the flip side, even if you can't help them with it, maybe you can create a piece of content or a message that is around that pain point, just to get them hooked. Just to be like, hey, we care about you, our audience. We know what your pain points are. So here's a little help in this area. Now we're going to switch to another area and talk about what we can help you with, right? What are the common questions that they ask, on a day-to-day basis, or to your sales team, or, whatever it is? What are the things that they're always wondering about? And if you could talk to your sales team, they usually have a pretty good idea of what the most common questions are asked when they're prospecting. And those are the questions that you really should be focusing on in your marketing. If you can answer those questions in the marketing, the sales process will be so much easier. And then finally, what problem are you trying to solve specifically? And not just, hey, here's the problem, but what is that going to do for somebody? How is that going to benefit them? How is that going to improve their life or their job or their family or, their free time? And that's really kind of the key message that you want to deliver. after you've built that rapport and that relationship and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, this is really turning into a science, right?
Right.
We were at this conference last week, Domopalooza, and for those of you that aren't familiar with Domo, they do a business intelligence software, and give them a little plug because the conference was excellent. But they talk specifically about how they predict, how they use analytics and data in their customers use analytics and data to predict things like how much cabbage that they need to have in store so that when St. Patrick's Day comes around, they're able to sell exactly how much they need, and being able to predict exactly what message they need to say to their audience so that they, have the highest amount of sales. That's the whole point, right? And we're going to definitely talk a little bit about big stuff here, big data things, but we're also going to be in that good, perfect, medium-sized business where there are a lot of tools out there that you can use that are accessible, and you don't need an entire data scientist. I talked to a lot of data scientists last week, and I instantly felt a little bit out of my league, I would say. Anyone with data scientists on their business card instantly just vaults themselves way ahead of me, but we'll definitely hit a little bit of that and a little bit of more of the tools that you can use and have access to right now today.
Okay, cool. And so some of the things that we should be asking ourselves and to our customers and to our prospective customers is the why questions. If you can understand why people feel and do and need the things that they do, then you are going to be light years ahead of your competition in your messaging and in your ability to close these deals. Why would my product be important to you? Why would you really use it? Is it valuable enough for my price point? Does it really affect you on a day-to-day basis as much as it needs to? And then you can kind of tweak your message or your product or your to make sure that it matches. Why would you not buy our product? What would keep you from purchasing what it is that I'm selling to you? What are the red flags? Is it cost? Is it functionality? Is it does it break too easy? What is it that would keep you from purchasing what I have? And and this is a really important one for like a B2B business. Why would your boss care? And that's kind of the key here, is that everybody in business is kind of there for a purpose. You're not just working at your company just because you love to work at your company. You want to be able to progress. You want to be able to grow. You want to get your bonuses. You want to improve your life for your family. And in order to do that, you need to do something that your boss will care about, right? So what does your boss care about? Why would he be inclined to use this product or this service or whatever it is, and kind of expand that circle of influence a little bit from just who you're talking to also who do they care about, and why does it matter to them as well. All right. Now, building your audience and building a buyer persona, as we call it, it can be tricky. There are all sorts of resources online on how to, and a lot of them are very similar. If you've read one, you've mostly read the next one. There's usually just like one or two tips that are different. I found that HubSpot has an amazing resource as far as building the buyer persona and documenting that buyer persona so that everyone in the company can kind of can look at that and understand it. And they've kind of put this together into a type form quiz called makemypersona.com. And if you go there and you start working through it, you'll find that they're asking questions that you hadn't even thought might even be important to a buyer persona. And so, even if you don't answer all the questions, at least you can kind of consider, a little bit of the outside of the box. What other kinds of things might I be interested in learning about my audience that might help me in my marketing? I've found that some of these questions I don't really care for personally. I don't really know, how important it is that I know what the favorite food or something is. I wouldn't say that they're that trivial, but the more you learn about these people, the better. And this is a really cool tool because once you put all the information in, it actually downloads a Word document with like a cool little image and a very well-defined buyer persona that you can then circulate to your company so that everyone can understand what your audience is.
Yeah, that's awesome. I again, just going back to Michigan, if I didn't know that about Michigan, I never would have, had that connection.
Right. Okay, cool. So how do you get the information? Where do you go to research this stuff? How do you learn the things that you need to learn? And number one is look to your best existing customers. I'm sure that if you're in business, you have customers that you're like, if I had 1 million of that customer, we would be it'd be so easy. We'd make so much money. Everything would just fall into a place, right? You want to know as much as you can about those customers, and you want to duplicate that effort and get as many of those customers as you can. It's not enough to just get customers, because a lot of customers might be difficult. They might take up more of your resources. You might be losing money on some customers. And so you want to make sure you hone in and you refine your message and your audience to only the people that you really want to have in your company. And if you can continue to refine that over time, you'll find that your messaging gets better and people will engage with it more readily, and that you'll close more deals, and you'll be the kind of company and customers that you want, right? So, in this GIF example, you're the one I've been looking for. You're the customer I've been looking for. Tell me more about you. Call them up. Say, hey, you are one of our favorite customers. I'm going to send you a gift basket. Is it all right if I have a short conversation with you, just more about your work, about your day-to-day, about what you care about how your organization works? I think it would really help us out, and we really appreciate your business. How often has that happened? I've never been called like that before. I would love to have someone call me and just be like, hey, we appreciate you as a customer. Let's just chat for a minute. I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, there's no better person that knows the questions that they had on their mind when they came to you than your customers, right? That you can ask them what pain points do they have? What questions do they have? What questions do they still have? How can you still help them in progress and move forward? And you'll be surprised, especially in B2B, the things, just in everything, I guess, in general, what diamonds in the rough there are and what insights you can find just from asking them questions and trying to ask them the right questions, but sometimes the wrong questions lead you down the right path. In a past life, I did a lot of furniture and built a lot of furniture, and we would meet with these homeowners, and I would ask them the wrong questions on purpose. And I would say, oh, you wanted this table in a dark walnut color, right? Or in a black, because I knew just based on the aesthetics of their home that they did not want black.
They've got
dark
bright colors,
wood,
white walls, and
maybe that sets me up for failure. But in my mind, I knew immediately if I asked them the things that they didn't want, they would instantly tell me the things that they wanted, and especially
in much more detail.
More detail. No, not dark at all. We want white, or we want clean, or we want natural wood tone, or whatever it was. And a lot of times that helps the buyer too, because sometimes they don't necessarily know what they want, but they know what they don't want. And you can definitely craft some questions surrounding what they don't want ahead of time, and then you'll instantly be able to have them just determine what it is that they do want.
Right. Perfect. There's some other tools as well. These are kind of some of the free tools that everyone basically uses. Number one is Google Analytics. And this is kind of an interesting topic. I've worked with hundreds of clients now, and I've found that oftentimes, more often than I would have expected, they tell me who their target audience is and who they want to target, and they've been sending traffic to their website. But then when I go into their Google Analytics, I find that the people who are coming to their website are somebody completely different, and they don't even know who's coming to the website and who's actually interested in their message. They just expected that their message would resonate with the audience that they wanted, and it actually isn't, And so if you go to Google Analytics, and this is a little bit more technical as opposed to kind of the high level stuff that we've been talking about so far. But if you go to Google Analytics, there is a way to see a lot of the demographics of the people that are coming to your website. And this might help you, number one, see who your message is resonating with. Number two, how you might be able to change who you expect to reach, and change your message to reach those people more fully. Or number three, realize that you need to change what you're doing entirely in order to reach your target audience, right? So if you log into Google Analytics, hopefully you have that set up and it's ready to go. There is a tab on the left-hand side called Audience, and you can see that here on the left-hand side, that has all sorts of data in it. The example here is the geolocation. Oh, let me go back. Oh man, back. Is the geolocation. So I can see, okay, for Foxtel marketing, obviously the United States is going to be kind of our primary thing. They're our primary demographic. We do all of our advertising in the United States only, but we do get interest from quite a few places in the world. And as a result, we actually have quite a few clients from Australia or from England or from, we even got one just in the last month that caters to the Middle East. It's really interesting stuff. But so we can kind of see, where these people are coming from. You can look at the demographic information. If you click on demographics, it'll tell you that, how many of these people are male or female, how many of them are married, and Google has all sorts of data that you can, so go through and look through this. You got demographic data, you got their interests, where do they go? What kind of industries are they normally looking at online? What behaviors do they have? Do they shop online? Do they not shop online?
Mm-hmm.
Do they, what other things do they do online? What technology are they using? Are they on mobile or are they on desktop? These kinds of things may not matter so much when you're speaking to them, but especially online, if you're advertising or trying to reach these people, it will help you realize, this is kind of the avenue we need to take to reach that person, right? So Google Analytics is a great tool to use. I would highly, highly, highly suggest, if you haven't recently in the last quarter looked at that section of Google Analytics, please go in and do so. You might find some very interesting things about your audience and who you're targeting that may help you in the long run.
Yeah, I know that specifically here at NUVI, we've talked about this in a past webinar, but our audience still visits our website. They're technophiles, obviously. They love sports as well as they're movie lovers, and shutterbugs. They love photography. So we try to make sure that a lot of our images, a lot of the posts we create, the blogs have good imagery with them. We want to make sure that a lot of the traffic is on mobile. So we want to make sure that our website and our blog is set up for mobile. And then we also want to make sure that we talk about movies, social media based things that are trending, whether it's Beauty and the Beast or the Academy Awards, things that people in our audience will care and read about and consume. Like we're looking at our audience data and being able to create the message, even the size of the message, to make sure that it's mobile friendly or make sure that it's easily clickable or whatever the message needs to be based on the audience.
Right. And a lot of the content we've created, has been with the analogy of a sports team or of a movie or, the infographics we build have the imagery of movies or sports or things like that, because that's what they're interested in. And it just so happens that NUVI being a very, it's a social media platform, people use social media for those things almost entirely. It's like news, sports, movies, that is social media, right?
Music.
So and music, right? So, so it's only natural that then that doesn't only tell us more about the audience, but it also tells us more about our message, right?
Yep.
So it's really cool that way. Another great tool to use is your Facebook. So social media analytics, all social media platforms, at least the major ones, have some sort of analytics about the audience, not just how many clicks you got, how much money you spent, but also who is doing those things, right? So you can see here, this is an example from your business page. So if you're an admin of your business page and you go to your page, there's this little bar at the top, and on the left-hand side it says, here's your page. So that's where you see your page, and then there's a bunch of other options, right? The Insights tool gives you a little bit more information about the people. If you come down here, you click on people, it gives you a bunch of insights on a lot of other things as well. If you click on people, it gives you a brief kind of view into who is interacting with your page. So here's Foxtel Marketing again. 55% are women, 45% are men. I wouldn't have expected that initially, because the majority of the people we talk to are business people who are on the upper executive level. And, unfortunately, and I don't agree with that, they're mostly men, and so we most of the initial conversations I have with companies are with men. Now, oddly enough, once I start closing the deals, it's women who are actually approving the deal a lot of the time. And I love that, and honestly, working with women as my clients is way easier than working with men most of the time. I love working with women. They generally understand a lot more than men do.
You're telling me that women communicate better than men?
I know, right? What?
That's the next webinar. That needs to be the next conversation.
Right. But we also have ages, so if I'm targeting on social media, I can see, okay, well, maybe 25 to 44 or maybe 54 is my age group. And I can kind of eliminate some of these other bookends because maybe I'll lose money, on clicks or whatever. I can see where these people are. So New York happens to be our top city, which is really interesting since we're located in Utah. But maybe we run an ad just to New York to see how that goes. Language, obviously English, we're targeting the United States the most, but there is some Spanish, French, again, Spain, Spanish, Canadian people, a lot of people from India, maybe, who knows what kind of traffic that is, but it gives us a little bit more insight. Now, this isn't the only tool within Facebook that you can use. So if you have your admin as well, you can come up here to your business manager menu, and there's an audience insights tab as well. And this will give you insights into any audience you want, not just your own, right? So it actually has like an audience builder tool. Let me see if I can have, nope, it doesn't show it. There's an audience builder tool, and one of the options is people who interact with my page, but you can also say, okay, anybody who interacts with another page. So if you want to do competitor research into who's talking to your competitors, that's a great way of doing it. Or if you are saying, okay, I want to explore another option, you can actually build an audience as if you're like building a Facebook ad. And it will give you information based off of the audience that you put in there as well. But I mean, it has all sorts of information. Here's the lifestyle. For some reason, country enthusiasts show up here, and a few times actually, country ways. But you can see that firmly established business seems to be the largest lifestyle demographic that we have on here. But it also shows relationship status. A little less than half of the people are married. Or in a relationship. What education level do they have? Well, a lot of the people I have, that we have college education, but they aren't grad school graduates, right? So that's one way we can target online as well. Here's and there's all this other info. Oh, let's go back. Job title. It tells me what the job titles of these people are that have been interacting with my page, and that's super valuable for me to know, because then I can write content based off of what the job title is. 31% are administrative, so we want to target the C-suite or the executives or the management, right? But a lot of the people are in the production as well. So maybe we write some content to directly to the executive, and then we write some content directly to the day-to-day worker, who then takes that to the executive for approval. That kind of stuff. And at the top here, you can see here's another menu. There's all sorts of options. What are the demographics of these people? What pages are they liking? What other watering holes do they have? Where are they located? What activity are they doing? What kinds of things are they purchasing? Those kinds of things are all very interesting things to know about your audience. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, and all these tools, they're all again, we talked about, like, we're going to go from the basic to the middle type of tool to the full-on enterprise. But a lot of these tools, like a lot of us are exactly, we know a lot about these tools. We know, yeah, we got to jump into Google Analytics. Hopefully, a lot of us pull some insight from those Facebook insights, and really you can dive into that for your Facebook page. Some of those, I'm gonna go look at our NUVI one and see what insights I can glean from right after this webinar. But how do you find out more about the audience or where the other audiences can be? I have a couple examples here that are directly associated with NUVI. I want to show just a couple of the examples. I can't show everything on how you can find your audience inside of NUVI, but the ones I want to kind of touch on, kind of base myself off of this next.
Sorry.
Let me click it. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, so these are definitely, like Darren likes to talk about, different watering holes. So your audience could potentially be based around your industry, based around the things that your company or your business is involved in. It could be based around topics. Maybe you're looking to do a product launch, and the product you're coming out with is associated with artificial intelligence, or we had a good example of robotics that we talked about in our last webinar, but the different topics that your audience might be already paying attention to. When they get up in the morning and they look on their Twitter, they're looking for these specific topics to find out. Maybe it's politics, maybe it's, again, who knows what the topics are. Your audience can definitely be associated with certain keywords. I know that a lot of people right now in March, especially here at NUVI, care about March Madness, and we're gonna jump into that here in just a minute. But then, as Darren was talking about your competitors, what audience is your competitors targeting, as well as what audience does your what audience is your competitors are they talking to? That's a really key thing to be able to understand and know, because maybe they're missing the mark and maybe you're hitting the mark, but maybe there's some insights there that they're winning on, and some areas there that you can touch on. I wanted to show this classic photo. I just finished reading this amazing book called Shoe Dog about Phil Knight and Nike, and he was an accountant. He's a very numbers-based guy, and he talks in there several times about advertising and how he doesn't really quite believe in it. He doesn't really quite want to touch on it. And this photo comes out when the company is just very still new and very young, of Farrah Fawcett, one of the
the hot icons of the time.
hot
Right?
icons of the time, Charlie's Angels. There we go.
Right.
One of the Charlie's Angels, and she's riding a skateboard and she's wearing these Nike Cortezes, and he said as soon as this image dropped, they weren't able to keep the shoes on the shelves. They just sold out. So maybe your audience has some things and some people that are either talking about you or that can influence you, good or bad. You need to be able to know and find out and instantly know about those things and discover those things. We have a customer. I'm not privileged to say who they are, but they were jumping into their social media conversations and trying to figure out their audience, and they found out that Rihanna was wearing an article of their clothing, and they were you would think that if a global superstar was wearing something of yours, you would know, but they didn't, and they saw that and they were able to say, okay, well, if Rihanna's doing this, her audience is going to also want to participate or wear or drink or eat or whatever it is that the person is doing, and instantly your audience becomes her audience, and you need to be able to jump on those things immediately.
Right, and that's an interesting thing, because if you're that company, you think you have a target demographic, but then suddenly you have to worry about someone else's target demographic and how to message that to them, right? In order to kind of swoop in and kind of corral those people into your own audience.
Yeah, the audience tends to shift, right? And you make a bigger audience, you can make a smaller audience, you can be more targeted, it can be more specific to demographic. The audience definitely will shift and adjust, but being able to take your audience and then expand upon it with that person's audience, I mean, that's the whole point of sponsorships. That's the whole point of being able to have LeBron James do a Super Bowl commercial drinking Sprite, is that you not only are you talking to the people in the Super Bowl audience, you're talking specifically to
LeBron
audience, NBA, which may not be too far from your audience, but there's definitely a niche of people that prefer NBA over NFL, especially globally. You think of the global audience, NBA is way more global and popular than the NFL, where it's a little bit more landlocked here in the United States. Again, we wanted to jump back to Donald Trump, and everyone saw this tweet shortly after he was elected, and he was talking about Boeing. So these people that are in your potential audience that have additional audience might be saying good or bad things about you. It's also very important to know about that. And we know that from Trump's tweet here, you can see the stock price of Boeing and how it drastically dropped. Now, who's talking about your business? Who's talking about your brand? Who's talking about your industry? Who's telling good things about your industry? Who's telling bad things about your industry? What's causing your sales to drop in Southern California? Or what's causing your sales to skyrocket in New York? You need to know and understand who else's potential audience there is by understanding who these people are, and then you can either speak to that potential audience. I'm really getting it's almost like Inception right now. I'm sorry,
Right.
This is getting a little deep, but being able to understand the potential audience of your potential audience. Am I making any sense at all?
Makes sense. You have to think about everyone you're talking to, not just the initial people you're talking to, right? So you talk to one person, and you got to be able to think about, especially with social media being so prevalent, if they were to share this, how would that appeal to their audience as well, right?
Yeah, and definitely with that's how we get our news and our information through social media. There's definitely that trail you can follow. You can follow that trail of who's talking, who's repeating that talk, and what could that potentially do or mean for my audience. So I had a quick example of that here. The Final Four, March Madness. For those of you that don't know, March Madness is going on right now, where it starts with 68 teams, 64 really, and it gets broken down all the way down to the Final Four. The Final Four is this weekend. There's 4 teams, and then there'll be a champion throughout the tournament. It's extremely popular. So we've been monitoring the conversation with NUVI. So this is the NUVI dashboard. You can see the spikes of conversation throughout the weeks. And why does the Final Four matter? So let's pretend that we're all the NCAA, and the Final Four is our product. It's our business, our brand. This is the product that we're putting out there. So our potential audience is anyone that cares about the Final Four, right? They're tweeting about it. They're sharing things on Facebook. They're showing YouTube reactions to that game-winning shot. at the local bar they're at. Anyone that's posting or commenting about the Final Four is a huge industry. Sports lovers, enthusiasts, I mean, our potential
you see the
audience
reach is
massive.
1.5 billion.
1.5 billion reach, right? So we're talking a massive audience. So I wanted to break down and have you jump into this audience and be like, okay, well, who should we expect in this audience? Who should be some of the top influencers inside of this audience? So we look at the audience influencers of March Madness. So of course we have North Carolina. Now North Carolina is one of the teams that's in the Final Four. So yes, they should be there. Their team is, it looks like here the tweet says, hundreds of Tar Heel fans wave goodbye to basketball ahead of their trip to Arizona. So the fan base is behind their team. They're excited. You can see here that they're obviously one of the influencers of the Final Four conversation. But look at all these other influencers. These are all the other potential audiences that we as the NCAA company, right, could potentially reach by looking at these influencers. The Boston Globe, Cornell, Arizona Cardinals, the football team. Why would they care about it? Well, the Final Four and the championship games are going to be played in Arizona Cardinals Stadium in Phoenix or Glendale. And Senator John McCain from Arizona. So you can see how the conversation is being broadcast about the Final Four from all of these different potential audiences. This is the inception that we were talking about earlier. What I wanted to show, though, here is the Indians, the Cleveland Indians, the Major League Baseball team. So I thought, why are the Cleveland Indians talking about the Final Four? Like, I get it, sports, baseball season's coming up, opening day. Like, what specifically are they talking about? So you go ahead and click on Indians, and you'll see what they're talking about here. Only 2 men have played in the Final Four and the World Series. Kenny Lofton, who was a standout for the Cleveland Indians, and Tim Stoddard. And so I was like, who's Tim Stoddard, and what is this guy? Like, this could be anyone. So I did a little research and found out that Tim Stoddard went to NC State, who is a competitor, as you would say it, of North Carolina. University of North Carolina, NC State, same state. Their audience that they're trying to reach is the same demographic. It's the same. If you look at a business perspective, they're competitors. And so this is an opportunity for NC State. And if we have anyone from NC State here listening and watching, we love you guys. We love NC State to share their unique content here to an additional audience surrounding March Madness in the Final Four, about how one of their standout players, who then went on to play in the Major League Baseball for the Pittsburgh Pirates, but played in the Final Four for NC State. I mean, that's huge. Your audience upon audience, that inception thing that you're talking about, you can reach an additional audience inside of outside of your just regular people that you're talking to.
Right.
I think that's a huge opportunity to be able to find the audience inside the audience, and have some huge victories right there. One more thing I wanted to touch on real quick, and we'll just speed through this one. But this was we've monitored South by Southwest. Now, as a B2B company, you're definitely going to be wanting to participate in trade shows and expos. We went to the Domopalooza this last week, but you're going to definitely want to participate in these. What better way to participate in a trade show or an expo than to know who's going to be there, than to know who's talking about the expo or the insights or the things that are going on, the things they're excited about. And so we monitored South by Southwest. We were unable to attend this year, but you can see immediately who the top people are that are talking about South by Southwest. Now, if you're trying to determine, if you're trying to determine your audience and you're trying to determine, okay, I have this message, I have this giveaway, I have this blog post, I have this ad, I have this product, the things that we want to do for this trade show or expo. Who do I want talking about me? Who do I want talking about my product or my audience? Now, you're going to have everyone that's going to say, oh, hey, we're going to be at South by Southwest, but who really is making an impact? So you immediately see here, Rolling Stone, USA Today, Billboard, Mashable, University of Texas, Austin, Android, Ad Age. I mean, these are things that, yeah, some of them should be very obvious, I guess you would say, but there are definitely going to be a lot of people that are going to tell you that they're very influential and that we're going to be there. And if you put your advertisement in our magazine, or if you do your ads on our website, you're going to get these results. Well, I would rather know before I did that. I would rather know for sure, okay, well, if these are the top influencers for the audience that I'm trying to hit, then these are the people I'm going to go with. And I clicked on Neil himself here, Neil Gaiman. He's a fantastic author. My wife loves Neil Gaiman, and I was trying to come up with an example for South by Southwest. If I was trying to promote something, Neil is obviously a top influencer inside of the conversation. I would definitely do everything I could to get him involved in whatever it was I was trying to promote or sell. I mean, it's the beauty of marketing and advertising is finding the right person to give you the right message to the right audience. And right there, I feel like that would be a home run inside of the South by Southwest
absolutely.
conversation.
Cool. Yeah, no. And so I think, particularly with NUVI, but, you can do a lot of this research. I mean, less in depth than this for sure, just by going on Twitter, going to the trending topics, finding out who's talking and kind of who's getting the most engagement on them, and then kind of go from there. Obviously, this makes it a lot easier. But I mean, it's not like it's the end of the world if you don't have NUVI. You can still do some of this research, and especially with the other social tools, NUVI just makes it so much easier, right?
I didn't want to come on too hard there, but
right.
and I think I got a little deep in the inception points, but I'm very passionate, obviously, about the right message to the right audience, and these things definitely will help and won't hurt you. And so being able to take advantage of those things definitely would set you up for success.
Perfect. So we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit here. And instead of talking about the audience, how to speak to the audience now. And so one of the big things that I've learned in marketing, especially with ad copy, landing page copy, headlines, blog post headlines that aren't just clickbait, is how to speak to an audience about the benefits as opposed to the features versus benefits topic. And I thought, as I was kind of doing some research for some images for this, I came across this little cartoon that I found on vapingo.com, and I thought it was glorious. This is a perfect example of the features versus benefits. A lot of people are because they're working at this company or they've developed this product, they know how awesome the product is, and they want to tell people how awesome the product is, right? It would be like, for instance, here's Popeye. It would be like saying, we make the world's best spinach, and they talk about this section right here in the product, the spinach. Oh, this spinach has this many amino acids or this many vitamins or whatever. But really what people want to know is, if you eat the spinach, this is the result that you will get from it, right? And that is really the thing that resonates with everyone. If you eat our spinach, you will become the strongest, most, crazy dude there is out there, right? And that should be the message. Your ad copy, your landing page copy shouldn't be, the best spinach on the market. It should be become the Popeye of your industry or whatever it is, right? And that will resonate and be better for your audience and resonate more than anything else. So here's some examples that again, from vapingo.com, big shout out to them for having provided this for us. But they have, and this blog post has like 100 examples of this, right? So here's a couple examples, for a mobile phone. The feature that they built in is an integrated email application. But what's the advantage? You can check your emails wherever you are, right? And that's way more interesting to me than, we have an integrated email application, right? What the heck does that mean? I don't really care, right? But checking my emails wherever I am, I do care about that, right? And so here's their compelling sales message. With fully integrated email system, they can kind of mention their feature. The state-of-the-art mobile phone allows you to keep in touch with your customers when you're on the move. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's exactly what I want. Whereas if they had just said integrated email application, which apparently is what I need, I would not have even batted an eye at that. I would have just been like, hey, move along. I don't really care, or whatever. Same thing with the computer.
No one buys an iPhone because of the integrated email operation.
Right, exactly.
They buy it because it's all right there.
Right. And it integrates with all your other things. But why is that so important? Well, it's because you can have your data on one thing to another and you don't have to worry about it, right? Eliminate the worry. That would be the message, right? And then with the computer, same thing. Here's why does it keep jumping? 64 gigabyte hard drive. Cool. It sounds actually to me a little small.
Yeah.
But apparently it's a big deal. With the 64 gigabyte hard drive, you can store all your important documents on one computer without having to worry about performance issues. Okay, perfect. Eliminate the worry. That's the value prop. Perfect. And that is what's going to get people into your door is the benefit of what you're doing versus the feature, right? The feature is important. If you're really technical and you're comparing, when you get to a point of, here's a little quick sales lesson. How's that? You have your marketing funnel. You know, you got your top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel. In order to get as many people as you can, you need to talk about the benefits all the way down to the very bottom of the funnel. Then when you're in the sales process, when people already know that this is the solution they want, now they're just picking whose solution you want, you know, competitor versus competitor. That's when they start talking about the features. Okay, well, which one of these things that all do the same thing for me actually does it better? That's when it gets more technical, that kind of thing. But all the way up until that point, it's all about the benefit. It's all about what it's going to do for you. And then once they make the decision that, okay, that's what I want, now who's that do I want? That's when you get to the features part of it, right? Just kind of as a little bit of a clarification.
Yeah, and as we're trying to make the right message to the right audience, right?
Right.
We got to make sure that the message is the right message, not just the right message to the right audience. And these definitely are very applicable to everyone out there.
Right, absolutely. So one way to get to this point is to distill. You know, we got a picture of vodka on here. Vodka is distilled 3, 4, 5 times, depending on what vodka you drink. But basically, it just makes it so pure and so powerful, basically, that one shot of vodka can give you a pretty good buzz, right? And so if they hadn't have done that distillation process, then someone's going to have to drink a whole bottle to get drunk or even to feel anything. And so that's a little bit less valuable. You know, it's like, you know, it takes a lot more of it in order to get one person into the door, you know, and so the same thing happens with your sales message. Your sales message is I wouldn't say it's like alcohol, but people enjoy alcohol, you know, and they enjoy having that at parties. And it's kind of, you know, without it at a lot of things, it doesn't really make things work, you know. And so your message is kind of the same way. If you have the right message, it can be the life of the party. It can affect people way stronger than if you don't have a good message, right? So you want to take your message and you want to distill it again and again and again and again until just one tiny little shot of your message does it for your audience, you know, and you're going to have to do that if you want your ad copy to be effective. You know, an ad is just a little shot glass of your overall message that you're really trying to hook someone with. And your landing page is just a little shot glass of your message that you're really trying to hook people into with, right?
Yeah, I think of some of the like best ad copy and some of the best things. Got milk,
right?
I don't always drink beer, but when I do,
right?
Like
things, I prefer Dos Equis, right? Exactly.
Like things that are distilled and boiled down to just that one message. It just resonates with everything. Think different, right?
Right.
Like Apple.
Just do it. You know, these slogans are like the prime example of this distilled down thing. But, you know, depending on what your product is, it could be as simple as make more money or, you know, make your life easier or, you know, be able to listen to this sound on the go or whatever, you know, like depending on your product, it's going to be completely different. So, you know, one example of this, and I just kind of threw this together really quick and easy. It's not the greatest example, but you can kind of get the deal. So you really think about, you know, what is our value prop? Okay, our 1 week workshop, it'll teach you everything you need to know to increase sales and make more money, right? So, I mean, that's initially speaking a decent message, and, you know, it definitely explains to somebody why they should do it. But if you just go with that main message, it's not as powerful as if you distill it down and down and down. So if we distill it down one more time, it says, learn the essentials to increasing sales and making more money. You know, initially that sounds pretty good, but let's take it one step further. Increase sales and make more money. You know, okay, cool. How do I do that? And suddenly people are asking questions and they're wanting to know more rather than like, okay, I know exactly what's going to happen. And then make more money selling. You know, you may or may not make that step, but okay, cool. And again, it's like, it's a very, very simplified, very distinct message that's like, okay, yes, that's exactly what I want. Now I need to find out how it's going to do that or why it's going to do that. And it keeps people on the page. It keeps people engaged. And you can go on from there, right? And you can do this with every single message there is, you know, and if you just take an extra 5 or 10 minutes before you put your message out into the world and just think about, okay, how can I simplify this a little bit more? How can I make this a little bit more powerful? How can I make this a little bit more succinct so that if someone were to come across this ad or this landing page or whatever it is and read this headline, you know, they're going to be asking questions right away, right? Okay, and then that leads to what your tone and voice and branding should be. You know, again, from the beginning, a lot of the research you're going to do is how your target audience communicates, how they speak, and how they expect to be spoken to. Now, this particular part of it is a little bit loose, you know, because not only do you want to know how these people speak, but you also want to differentiate yourself from other people, right? So this kind of goes hand in hand, and you have to give and take and test. But number one, you start with how your audience speaks and is spoken to for the most part, and then you find some way to differentiate just a tiny bit to make sure that you stand out from your competitors, right? Ron Burgundy's "When in Rome," or whatever. Yeah, I mean, you're in Rome when you're talking to your audience, and so you want to be able to speak like them. But Ron Burgundy was also an iconic character, and he did not speak necessarily exactly how the people expected to be spoken to, and as such, he became a big sensation, right? It's kind of similar with our businesses. We want to be able to speak and use the lingo and the tone and the voice that our audience is expecting, and then tweak it just a tiny bit to kind of scratch that nerve a little bit and get them to pay more attention rather than saying, well, this sounds the same as everything else that I hear. So both are very important.
Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely a testing thing.
Right.
Trial and error and trying to get that nailed down just right. And when you do, you can hit home runs. I mean, the all the great ad campaigns are something that they've tested and they've tried and they get it dialed in and then they hit the home run. We're getting a couple questions. If you guys have any questions while we're talking here, go ahead and chat them in either in the chat feature or the questions box. Looks like we have someone from San Diego.
Yeah.
Ron Burgundy is here on the screen. It's definitely a hand in hand there for sure.
Perfect. Yeah, we got and a few people have kind of mentioned that. This is kind of cool, just so you guys know. We got someone from Johannesburg here. We've got San Diego. We've got San Jose. A few other places as well. So welcome. We're happy to have you here. And so again, if you have any questions, please send them in, and we'll kind of touch on those. Okay, perfect. So once you have your tone, voice, and branding, again, we kind of touched on this already. But what are the common questions? Again, talk to your sales team if you have one, or your customers if you have those. What are the most common questions that are asked by your customers or by your prospects, and then use those in your messaging. Try to answer those questions before they even come up would be the ideal situation, because it'll save you time and money again on the back end. But people say you'll find that people are asking the same question over and over and over and over again, and so the key is finding a way to communicate that answer to the question before they have to ask it, right? And that way they, and they'll feel more comfortable and more trusting of you as you do that. Again, watering holes. Here's some examples of watering holes that that I might be interested in as well. I've got my normal social platforms, my Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. I got ESPN for sure. I check ESPN at least once a day just so I can kind of keep up on everything. Social Media Examiner, as a social media expert, I like to go there and kind of see what kind of new things are for business. Forbes, for just lifestyle time. Reddit is just kind of everything. It takes a certain type of person to be interested in Reddit, that kind of thing. But here's an example of a smorgasbord of watering holes that maybe I want to kind of target if my audience is on those, right? Maybe I want to have a Google ad that's specific to ESPN. And send that Google ad to ESPN because I know my target audience is on ESPN all the time. Or I know that my audience as a B2C customer, I've got a clothing line or whatever, I go for Twitter and I go for Instagram and I go for Pinterest because those are the watering holes of my audience as opposed to LinkedIn. Like I would never sell my clothing on LinkedIn unless it was like the super awesome executive suit collection, or something like that I know that my target audience is going to be interested in. So knowing these watering holes allows you to reach these people much more easily than if you were just trying to throw it out there and hope that they get to it, right?
Yeah, because as we mentioned earlier about like trade shows and expos, every industry has a trade show and expo, and you don't necessarily have to go there, but you can participate in the conversation whether you're there or not through these specific channels, especially through social media. So that's definitely a way to deliver the right message to your correct audience, because trade shows are definitely very industry related, very specific in their message, and specific in the group of people that go there. And one of my partners in crime here at NUVI likes to go to FanX or Comic Con, and there's definitely a specific group of people that goes and attends Comic-Con or any of those type of events and venues. And it's a major billion-dollar industry. You go there and you see all the vendors, you see all the people that are selling, that are promoting the upcoming movie or the upcoming Avengers thing or a specific video game. Or I mean, you start breaking down these industries and you start understanding and seeing how crucial it is to have the right message. You don't want to be the one guy that's at the wrong conference, but you can be the one guy at the conference that maybe the audience isn't expecting you to be at, and that's when you hit home runs, and that's when you really can be there before the industry and be there before your competitors for sure. Do we have any?
Yeah. So one question was about how to reach the household information on Facebook. Okay. I'm not sure if that applies to everyone. So if you guys have the same question, feel free to email me at darren@foxtonmarketing.com. I can walk you guys through it, or maybe put together a little video that I can send out. Here's one question. If you're just starting out, how do you find your audience? How do you find where they reside? We know that what is our value proposition. We know the problem that we want to solve in the marketplace. We know who our potential audience is, but we're not sure we know where they are. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. That is a great question, and it's definitely more difficult if you're just starting out to know where to find all these people. My biggest suggestion on this front is to look at your competitors. Find out where your competitors are getting their people, that have the same audience. And again, that Facebook tool is super useful for this. Twitter is also super useful for this because it's so easy to kind of look up who the followers of their pages are. But Facebook in particular, you can build an audience that, and have your audience be followers of this account or people who have liked the page of this account, and will give you all that demographic information, that kind of thing. And so you can kind of use your competitors as a starting point for your own audience as well. That would be my biggest suggestion, and probably would take the least amount of time of any of the other tactics that you would have. Including just testing it out. If most people do have some idea of who their audience is, most people aren't completely off the mark. So if you're testing things out and you try a few audiences, you'll usually be able to find something that works. But in addition to that, you'll be able to see through, whatever it is that you're testing with, what demographics through analytics or through Facebook or through Twitter or whatever it is are actually engaging with you. And then you can kind of change your target to fit more of who's actually engaging with you.
Yeah, I would definitely look into the industry. Sometimes you have to take a step back. Maybe your product or your service is a specific thing that is going to be, revolutionary in the industry. Well, you look at Elon Musk and Tesla, right? They decided we're going to build an electric car. Well, if you take a step back, well, they're not just building an electric car; they're building an automobile. So the industry is a little bit bigger, and then you start with that bigger audience. Okay, well, then we're going to talk to people that are interested in automobiles, right? And maybe a little bit more high-end automobiles. So then instantly your audience is probably cut in a third. And then you can start diving down. And at the time, Tesla had a competitor. I can't remember the name of it. Fisker. But anyway, you're going to have a competitor that's going to have a similar audience. So then you can start diving into that, like as Darren was saying, and seeing who and what they're talking about as well. That's a great question.
Okay. Yeah, I think that is answering. Okay. Is it good practice or a bad look to chime in on Reddit threads about your product where people are criticizing your product? Okay. Now this is a very touchy subject. I don't. So there's a few things that kind of go along with this on social media in general in response to people who are talking good or bad about your product. Number one is that less is more, but nothing is worse. Like if you don't say anything, then it just your people are free to kind of criticize you, right? You want to be able to build that relationship and hopefully win those people back. But if you say too much, then that could be even more disastrous because they could take that, run with it, and spread that around, right? So the good practice would be to be very, very, very professional about it. Say we're sorry, and almost have a canned response, right? And try to get that to be a one-on-one conversation and just say, we're sorry you're dissatisfied. We would really like to help you. Please reach out to us with your specific concerns and we'll resolve them, right? So it shows that you're trying to resolve the issue, but it doesn't allow that conversation of what exactly went wrong. And it's possible your company really did do something wrong and you really have to try to fix that. But you don't want that to be a public conversation. As a PR perspective, You want to be able to take that into a one-on-one conversation, try to make it right with that person one-on-one. And then if they have a good experience, then say, okay, now share that experience with everyone, and maybe that's a good PR move then at that point, once someone has been won over. But my suggestion would be one message. If you have an issue where, we apologize for the issue, please talk to us and we'll be happy to make it right for you in any way that we can, right? And then leave it at that. Don't say anything else. Don't respond to anything else. Just have that one message. Have that be the strong anchor, the pillar of what your message is. And then hopefully they'll reach out to you and you can kind of take care of that on your own, right?
Yeah, that's definitely, I had experience like that with T-Mobile recently. I had a question and concern about something, and I reached out to them on Twitter, and they immediately, responded and asked me to direct message them, and they would get right on it. And so we were able to, instantly take that complaint I had and take it right off of social media and into a private conversation. Now Reddit's a little different, so I would definitely, like Darren was saying, have more of a canned response. That is, reach out to us at, be specific, use your name, even say, reach out to me, Scott at NUVI. I'd be more than willing to help you. Anytime a bully or someone is trying to degrade you or your business online, a lot of times by offering help or by offering that service, you're instantly able to take away their anger, and it turns into more of a constructive conversation and an opportunity to really build a good relationship with a potential customer. Whether they end up buying your product in the end or not, they will understand that, look, we're trying to provide this good or this service. So that's definitely an interesting question, and thanks for shouting out. That's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, the next question is, how do you change the audience you're reaching, i.e. a different age demographic or something like that? Number one is you change your message entirely. You change. So if you want to change to a specific demographic, you have to redo your research. You have to, and then you change all the messaging you have. You change your website, you change your content, you change what you're writing about, you change your ad copy to match that. But it really doesn't have to be as complicated as it seems like it would be. I mean, it really is just a matter of changing a few words in your messaging to respond better to the lingo of who it is you're trying to target, right? You don't have to, most of the time your value prop remains the same between audiences. It's just how you communicate that value prop. And it's really as easy as just changing the forward-facing messaging, on your ads. What the first thing someone sees about your company. And so it doesn't have to be like a big monumental shift necessarily. It could just be like a slight tweak of your landing page copy or slight tweak of your ad copy to make sure, and then change your ad audience definitely, so that you're reaching the right people. That would be my biggest suggestion on that. And then start creating content that they might be interested in. If you're trying to reach an older audience, don't do as many videos. Don't do as many more technologically savvy things. Do a little bit of writing, have like a more stock imagery type of image rather than something that's super engaging, because that's the kind of thing that they're expecting. Just kind of do a little bit of research toward that expectation. Do a few Google searches on how to target said demographic. And I'm certain that there's going to be a lot of information about, if not your specific demographic, something similar to that, and you can kind of take that and tweak it for your own worth. Hopefully that helps a little bit. I know it wasn't super concrete advice, but that's because it's not as difficult as it might sound to switch that audience. It really is just a matter of just asking your question. How does what this what is different between what this demographic cares about and what the demographic we're already targeting cares about? And if you can identify those differences and then just tweak your messaging to match those differences, then you should be good to go.
Yeah, we had an example of this where we're here at NUVI. We're known for social media intelligence and social media analytics. And at this conference, again, we went to last week, we're talking to data scientists and business intelligence professionals. And our message needed to change just a little bit. We just tweaked a couple of the words. We adjusted the message just a little bit. And obviously, we knew the audience. We didn't have to research the audience. We knew who they were going to be, but we did need to research what was the message that we needed to change. What was something that would be more applicable to this specific audience? And so, it's going to be your still your value prop. It's still going to be the thing that you do better than anyone else. You just need to adjust it for that person and adjust it for that either that title or that industry professional and how it's going to help them accomplish their job.
Right. The benefit might be a little bit
do.
different than, you're right, depending on which person you're talking to.
Yeah, the more you can talk to how you're going to help them do their job or make their life better or easier or save them time, the better. So in looking at a different audience, try to figure out what are their pain points and how you can make their life easier.
Right. Another question is going back as well to, if you're just starting out, how do you know who your audience is? Our suggestion was to look at competitors. Now, there are certain situations, and I've worked with clients in the past that don't really necessarily have competitors. They're doing something a little bit new, something that's a little bit different than than the industry has expected. And they're kind of breaking new ground there. They don't really have competitors per se that are doing the same thing that they're doing. And so how do you target those people? How do you know who to target? And that is a great question. Number one is you probably don't even know if your product's going to work at first, right? You're breaking into new ground. You're not even sure that your product is going to work. And if that's the case, then your audience isn't going to work, or whatever. But, obviously there was some sort of pain point that you're trying to solve. And it came from somewhere, right? You didn't just have an idea that didn't apply to anything and start running with it, and you don't know, who's going to care about that. The thing that you're doing now came as a result of a specific pain point, of a specific problem that happened to somebody, whether it was you, whether that was someone you knew. And if that's the case, then that person or that job title of that person that had that problem that you are now trying to solve, that should be the basis of your audience, right? So if you need to, in this example, it would be short form animation media versus long form for TV or whatever. Why did you choose to do the short form stuff? Why did you choose to do that? What need was there that you said, hey, maybe if I do this, that would work, better for so-and-so, right? If whoever that so-and-so is the kind of the basis of your audience. Now, that being said, you're testing things in your new company and in your new industry all the time, and you really should be. The same thing needs to be true of your audience. You have an idea of who that audience is, but you really, really need to spend some budget and spend some ad dollars and spend some money on testing different audiences that you think might work, and making sure you have the tracking in place to really understand, which one of these audiences is going to work best for you, which one of these is really providing the most ROI, which one of these is converting the best. There's not really a good answer to say, this is the audience I'm targeting and I already know it. If you're breaking into a new industry and new ground, you're going to have to, probably waste some money testing out audiences that don't work, unfortunately. But use that initial reason as the basis, as the foundation of your audience. There is somebody or something that resonated with you, and that's why you chose to do that, right? And so take that and run with it and use that as your fuel, and you'll probably be able to find some good audiences that will interact with what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think a key aspect of that too is you're going to want to test. So I would, especially for a new product or a new service, definitely test and set things up where you're going to test one audience versus another, and trust yourself, trust your gut, trust the questions that people ask you and the questions that you yourself are asking, and just break that into two different audiences. Maybe your target is social media managers and people that are creating content. Maybe your target is their boss. We definitely have a little bit of that here at NUVI is to who we're targeting, and we definitely test all the time. Is it the person that's actually going to be using the product at the end, or is it the boss or the manager that is going to be the one pulling the trigger to say, yes, this is the solution for us? And so you definitely don't want to test those back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And the really interesting thing and the best part is that even if you fail miserably with your test, then you can, people are going to interact with it no matter what, whether it's good or bad. Then you can use these tools. You can use Google Analytics, then you can use Facebook, and then you do have data to work with that will tell you, these are the audience that did work, or this is the audience that didn't work. And you can start using, basically traffic and data drives all of this. So even if you're doing something that doesn't work, you're still doing something that does work because you're getting data that will help you refine and build that audience.
And going back to my building furniture days, ask the wrong questions. You know what questions to ask. You know which ones are wrong. Ask the incorrect ones. And your audience and these people and your customers, and maybe you don't have any customers, but people inside your organization, ask them the wrong questions on purpose, and they'll respond with things that they didn't even know they understood, but they'll respond with, oh, well, we're doing this because of dot, dot, dot. And they'll give you the reason and the message that is going to be right. And then play with that message and target your audience that, audience A versus audience B and see what wins.
Right. Perfect. So we have another question here. Well, what is more important? A brand delivering the message about themselves or picking up on social scenarios so the audience can know this so-and-so brand created this video? Can a brand do a campaign based on the user's interest, even if the brand is not associated with it? Yes, this is an absolute yes. Now it has to be done the right way, but this is something that we do all the time in our marketing agency is when a customer comes to us, we do an interview with them about their audience. And we ask them, okay, what are the things that they care about most, even if it doesn't, relate to what you're trying to do for them, right? So we know that people who work in the executive level PMO space, project management space, they have specific issues that are common among all of them. And my product doesn't necessarily solve all those issues. They might solve one or two of them, but I know that if I write content about those other issues or videos about those other issues, it will resonate with them, and they will come to my website and ask what it is that I do, and it will help to start that conversation as well. Now, it probably won't translate to exactly the sales or the engagement on that end that you want, because it's not directly about what you do, but it doesn't necessarily matter because you're already getting that brand knowledge into their heads. They start learning about you and who you are, and that you are an expert in them, not necessarily in what you do, right? And that's really what people want in a partner, when they become a customer, is they want to know that you understand them, not that you understand what you're doing, right? Necessarily. And so that kind of connection is very important. Now, as far as creating a video can be very expensive. So I would probably consider, the value of the video versus the cost of the video when creating a video that doesn't necessarily respond to what you have. And I would probably do that part of it after you've already done ones for the things you are associated with, because you don't want to have a video that's not associated with what you do. Then they go back to your YouTube channel, your website, and try to find a video that does say what you do and not have one, right? Then you're kind of putting the cart in front of the horse, and it doesn't really work that well. So, I would say that it's definitely not uncommon even to do it that way. It just needs to be done in the right order and in the right way, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of successful scenarios where brands showed interests before they actually even really talked about their product, and I go back to the Got Milk campaign, in that yes, they show milk. Yes, the person's drinking a glass of milk, but what they're showing and what they're telling you is an athlete or a professional that's at the top of their game drinking milk. So if you're looking at an athlete, you're thinking of someone that obviously takes care of their body, they exercise, they're at peak physical condition, and then they drink milk. Like that's kind of the side note to the full message of the opportunity there. And so I definitely believe in doing messages around other people's interests, because again, you could tell people how awesome your product is all day long, but if it's not going to help them or make them more money or save them time, if you're not addressing their concern or their desires, then you're missing the mark, whether your product is the absolute best thing in the world or not. You need to make sure that you're addressing their concern and their desire, whether it's a problem or maybe it's something that they don't know is a problem, but they just really like the color blue, and your product happens to be blue. Well, you're addressing something that matters to them more than it matters to you, and you're addressing the thing that they're going to buy more than you're trying to shove down their throat that you're the best at whatever it is you're doing.
Right. Cool. One more question here before we wrap up. What should be the tone of content while targeting CEOs and CIOs? Now, this is a great question. And my answer is that CEOs and CIOs is not a good enough audience. You don't know enough about the audience yet to decide how to speak to them. Is it CEOs and CIOs of multinational corporations, or is it CEOs and CIOs of a little coffee bar, or a nonprofit or whatever, right? It kind of depends. You have to get a little bit more information on that end before you can decide how to speak to them, right? So I speak to CEOs and CIOs all the time in my marketing. Some of these people are enterprise level, and as that being the case, they expect very professional, very buttoned up ways of speaking, maybe with a little bit of crassness, kind of thrown in there just to kind of break it up a little bit. But for the most part, it's very hard hitting. They don't have a whole lot of time to read something, so it needs to be very succinct, very to the point, very professional. And lots of times they're not even the one reading it. It's somebody going in and giving them an executive summary of what they read. And so if that's the case, I wouldn't even target CEOs and CIOs. I would target the people that are going to report to them, right? Now, if you have a very small company that, like a Harry's Razors or something like that, that basically everything that they do is off the wall and a little bit crazy, they probably don't want a buttoned up, very professional way of speaking to them. You can kind of glean a little bit of how they want to be spoken to by how they are speaking to their own audiences, and kind of go from there as well. So my suggestion would be do a little bit more research into who it is you're trying to target by industry, by size, by, and by their marketing to kind of get a little bit more information as to, their demographic and how they would be spoken to. So CEOs and CIOs in general is not a good enough audience. They're so different. They're so diverse between them that you need to narrow it down a little bit more before you can make that decision.
Yeah, and I think that's a good starting point for sure, right?
Yeah.
Like Darren said, he gave you some pieces there. You're definitely going to want to make sure your message is buttoned up or directed at a professional level, and it's very succinct. And again, you're going to want to talk to what makes them better, what saves them time, why your product is going to do this for them.
Right.
But that's a good starting point, and you definitely need to dive a little bit more into the messages that they're putting out, as well as find out a little bit more about them. Because I would definitely address a CEO completely different than I would a CIO.
Right.
And
definitely
technical versus business versus, just depends on the industry as well. Because sometimes the CEO and CIO might overlap and they might be the same person, but you're definitely going to want to adjust and create a message accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that being said, there are certain things that CEOs and CIOs care about universally. CEOs care about the bottom line. They care about ROI. They care about how much is this going to cost? Is this really better than what I'm using it right now? Growth. Those kinds of things are the things that CEOs care about. That's what they're built to. They don't care so much that it saves the employees, a lot of headache in this way. If you're talking to the employee, you can talk more about the day-to-day operations and how this will help you on a day-to-day basis. But the CEO, what he cares about is how much money is this going to cost me? How is this going to improve the bottom line? And those, so your message needs to kind of shift a little bit depending on who you're talking to. The CIO cares about the specs, and he's more technical. He does care about the features, typically speaking. He doesn't care so much about the benefits. He already understands the benefits most of the time. He wants to know, how fast is this going to run? Is this going to make my workforce, more efficient? Those kinds of things. And so, you have to, continue again to research those things and really understand what they care about, and be able to speak to them that way. Okay, perfect. So we're going to move forward with these slides just a little bit more. I think we only have like a couple more. So we got the watering holes, other potential channels to deliver your message, email, your advertisements, SEO even, is a way of doing that because it gets those keywords into that search engine. They come to the page. Now what's the message on the page, right? So your email copy, your email subject lines, your ad copy, your ad headlines, your SEO headlines and keywords all need to reflect this same communication with your audience, how they want to speak, and SEO is an especially interesting one because it's not only how they speak, but how they type in their searches, and it's going to be related on that way. And so you're going to have to optimize your pages and your content to match how your audience is searching for things online. And then the very last thing is that your audience will probably change over time. So you're going to want to go through this exercise over and over and over again. At least every 6 months to a year. What we like to do is with every so we come up with a major topic of content, and we know who we're speaking to with that content idea, and we create content in a bunch of different formats using that same topic for a certain audience. And then when we kind of revise, once we're kind of getting toward the end of that big content wave, we think about the next piece of content and who we want to target with that next piece of content. And we do our research all over again. And we speak to a different audience with that different piece of content idea. And we run with that for a little while, see how that goes. If it doesn't work well, we switch sooner. If it works really well, we kind of ride that out for a little bit longer before we switch our audience and our message again.
And just like this last question about CEOs and CIOs, you might start there with your audience, and that might be your initial target. But you might find that, well, I actually don't need to talk to the CEO just yet. Maybe the message needs to be to the VP or the president or the manager or depending which audience is where your initial conversation might start.
And something we probably should have mentioned toward the beginning, now that half the people have jumped off because we've gone over time, is that you should not only have one audience. You should have 2, 3, 4. Some companies have 10 specific audiences that they have buyer personas for that are very outlined, and they have to find a way to communicate with all of them, right? And so it makes it easier to plan your year as far as marketing and sales go, because you can say, okay, we're going to create content that focuses on this audience for the first 2 months, and then this audience for the next 2 months, and then this audience for the next 2 months, right? Or this quarter, or this half year, or whatever. So you should have more than one audience most of the time. Almost every company has a use case for more than one audience. And so you should outline and research for all of those audiences all the time.
Yeah, that's very important.
Okay, we've already had questions. That's great. Again, sorry we were way over time, but I think it was very, very. I think there was a lot of really interesting questions. Hopefully, we provided value to you guys. If you have more questions, you can email either one of us or tweet at us. Here's our Twitter handles. Additional questions you can email at webinars@nuvi.com, or myself, Darren at foxtelmarketing.com, or scott.brown@nuvi.com. And we'll do the best we can to answer all of your questions. We're willing to spend the time to do that with you guys. So if you have additional questions, or if we didn't answer the question that you have on this webinar, please reach out to us. We'll do we'll spend the time with you necessary to make sure that happens. And watch for the recording, and if you do get the recording, if you enjoyed this, if this was helpful, please share it with other people. Share it on your social if you can. We really appreciate that. And we really, really, really do appreciate you guys spending so much of your time this morning jumping in with us and interacting with us. We love you guys, and we hope that you guys will come to the next webinar and every webinar thereafter, and that we can continue to build that relationship. So we appreciate it. And yeah, do you have anything else, Scott?
That's it. Have a great day, and we'll get this up on YouTube as quickly as possible.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.